May I request the panelists to kindly turn on their cameras and unmute their mics as we will begin our session now. Ms. Yuvika, uh, please turn on your cameras. We will be starting our session shortly. Firstly, a very good evening to all the distinguished panelists and audiences today. Thank you all very much for tuning in today for some extremely good, knowledgeable content on this Sunday evening. My name is Hiba, and it is my pleasure and honor in welcoming you all to the webinar on Why Does Economics Matter, presented to you by VIT Chennai along with the Hindu Education Plus Career Counseling series. Today we have an extremely lovely and inspiring session because we have three panelists and one of them is joining us from over the seas. So it's extremely an honor to have all three of you today. It's a pleasure to have with us Dr. Sudipta Sarangi, Professor and Department Head of Economics at Virginia Tech University, USA. We have Ms. Yuvika Singhal, economist and analyst at Quant Eco Research, New Delhi. And we also have Dr. Jairaj Rajaya, HOD Economics, VIT University, Chennai. A warm welcome to the three of you, and I hope to have a great session ahead. Let's get this session started. So without holding up further, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Sudipta Sarangi. So Dr. Sudipta Sarangi is the department head and professor of economics at Virginia Tech. Prior to joining Virginia Tech, he has been a distinguished professor of business administration at Louisiana State University and a program director at the National Science Foundation. His research interests range from network theory to experimental and behavioral economics. He has been a consultant to organizations like the World Bank and the Food and Agriculture Organization. He currently serves on the editorial boards of the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, Journal of Public Economic Theory, and Studies in Microeconomics. He has over 50 published papers and has worked with researchers in computer science, mathematics, and industrial engineering. In recognition for his contributions to the academic world, he has won numerous awards and grants at Louisiana State University, including the Tiger Athletic Foundation Teaching Award, LSU Rainmaker Award, and LSU Distinguished Faculty Award. He is also the author of the popular book Economics of Small Things, and today he'll be discussing on the exact same topic. So welcome, sir. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Hiba. I think your introduction is a little bit too generous. So while I share my screen, let me start saying this. So why does economics matter? Well, my answer may be a little bit biased because, I am an economist. So obviously, I think it matters and it's actually very important. So most of the times when you are on a flight and you meet people, right, they will tell you that, oh, you're an economist, so you must be familiar with how to invest money, how to make money on the stock market. And contrary to popular opinion, that's not what economists do. What economists do is we study human behavior. We try to understand human behavior. There are other disciplines which also study human behavior, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and we are all different. What economists try to do is try and study human behavior both at the micro level and at the macro level. Psychologists, for instance, study the processes driving human behavior, right? So today I'm going to talk about, obviously I can't talk about all of economics. So I'll talk about only a few things. So I'll start very briefly about from micro level, and then we will go up from there. But really what I want everyone to understand is this picture, which is called Son of Man. This is by the painter René Magritte. So Magritte had this style where he would like to obscure things, right? So if you look carefully at the picture, you will see two eyes behind the apple. And human beings are fascinating because there is no end to what we can do. Therefore, understanding human behavior is trying to take the apple off and try to see the person behind, okay? And there is one way in which human beings are different from the kind of things that we would study in the subatomic world. For example, electrons don't have bad hair days. They don't fall in love. They don't get up feeling angry. They don't fight with others. But human beings are capable of doing these kinds of things, which makes it extremely difficult to study human behavior and to try and understand what we are doing. Okay? So, with that, let's talk a little bit in detail, right? So I'll be happy to answer questions about economics and other things later, but let's just get on. Right. So one of the things that anybody who studies economics very early on will come up with or be introduced to is the idea that incentives matter. Okay. So, Hiba, I think there's a question in the chat. If it's anything important, you should tell me. Otherwise, let's ignore it and keep moving. So, what do we mean by incentives? Well, I mean, parents will give their kids incentives to get them to perform well in their academic world, or employers will give incentives to their employees to work harder, so commissions, right? So, sales agents obviously work on commissions. Why? Because you want them to work harder. In agriculture, there's this idea of sharecropping. So, you own land, you give it out to somebody else to farm, and then they keep a percentage of the output, they give you a percentage. Sometimes it's fixed. So you can have a fixed contract, which is you get a fixed salary, or you can have a variable contract, which depends on your performance. Or you could have a mixture of fixed and variable contracts. Okay. So obviously, incentives are very important. They drive behavior. People fight over things like corner office. Okay. You can get employee of the month. That's just an incentive. You get social recognition. Incentives don't have to be money. Recognition among peers, right? So, getting the first rank in class. That's actually an incentive that motivates people to, not maybe everybody, but at least some people get motivated by that kind of incentive to work harder, right? So that's the sense in which incentives matter. But when we design incentives, we have to be careful. Sometimes incentives can have unintended consequence. So, which again, given human behavior, this is what makes economics very difficult. So let's think about unintended consequences. So in the early 1970s, seat belts were introduced in America for the first time because people realized, okay, there's lots of car crashes, people die in car crashes, so seat belts are a safety device that will protect people from car crashes. Once seat belts were introduced, the consequence was very interesting. Study in 1973 by Sam Peltzman finds that essentially what happens is after the introduction of the seatbelt, it's not that the number of accidents go down. It's the casualties of the people in the car goes down, but pedestrian casualties go up. Okay, so car drivers, now that they have a seatbelt, they feel more confident and safer. Therefore, they take more risks while driving and hit pedestrians who end up dying. So the total number of accidents actually remains the same, but the consequence is that it shifts from accidents between cars to accidents between car and people. Okay, so that's an unintended consequence. Another unintended consequence, which I want to talk about, is I'm not sure how many of you know him, but I'm guessing at least some of you know him, right? His name is Abhishek Upamanyu. I really think that economists should watch stand-up comedy. So why should economists watch stand-up comedy? Because stand-up comics, pretty much like economists, at least like microeconomists, will put human behavior under a microscope, and then they take a perspective on it, which is generally humorous, right? So that's the idea. So much like microeconomists, stand-up comics put human behavior under the microscope. So you have a lot to learn by watching stand-up comedy. So I'm not saying that you should only read economics books or my book or anything like that. You should also watch stand-up comedy. So here's this episode I randomly watched. So he talks about this idea that when they were kids, on his grandmother's death anniversary, his mother would tell them to go give food to poor people. So then he says, wow, this is a very interesting thing. Thank God poor people do not catch on to the idea that death implies free food. Right? Because if poor people caught into the idea, or people who are starving caught onto the idea that death implies free food, they would suddenly start killing people so that they can get free. Okay. Now, obviously, it's a joke. You have to take it in that sense. But the idea is this sets up perverse incentives. Okay. Or like the time the World Bank decided, there was a region in Lesotho where the farmers were very isolated. So the World Bank decided, well, maybe we will build roads there so the farmers can sell their crops outside. Once you build the roads, guess what happens? Cheaper crops from outside come and flood that village or that region. So whatever the farmers were doing, their life becomes even worse. Okay? So when dealing with economics, you have to understand ideas like incentives, but you also have to think about the fact that incentives can have unintended consequence. Okay, let's move on to another idea. Okay, so this is a very simple idea. This is tea time. So maybe somebody is having tea with biscuits, or some of you are having coffee with biscuits or whatever. But the idea is many things go together: bread and butter, or bread and jam, or the left shoe and the right shoe, right? So imagine if I give you 5 pairs of right shoes and only one left shoe. It's pretty much useless. Okay? Or I give you 1 shovel and 5 workers, or 1 computer terminal or 1 laptop and 5 students. Well, that's a problem because productivity is going to be hampered by the fact that there is not one piece of equipment for everybody working. So this is a serious consequence on productivity. Okay. So if we think about this, we realize that sometimes there are complementarities, and these complementarities actually matter. So, by the way, a question that's answered in the book, if you want to find out, suppose you are going to a temple or religious place of worship where you have to keep your shoes outside. Right? And imagine that you've gone there with brand new shoes. So there's always a very high probability that by the time you come out, your shoes might be missing. So what's the best strategy to prevent or to ensure that your shoes don't get stolen? If you want to find out the answer, you have to read the book. So there is a chapter about complementarities. Why are complementarities important in life? So think about output being a multiplicative function. Okay. So suppose output is the amount of labor times the amount of capital. So suppose you have 5 units of labor and 10 units of capital. So output is 5 times 10, 50. That's how much you're producing. If one of those numbers goes to 0, what happens? Output goes to 0, because 0 times 10 or 0 times 5 is 0. Okay? So output goes to 0. The idea that complementarities matter are very important in this sense. So Space Shuttle Challenger, if you think about large organizations or production functions in large economies, the amount of complementarity that is built in is very significant. Space Shuttle Challenger failed because of a small ring called an O-ring. There was a faulty, the O-rings used in the Space Shuttle Challenger were faulty. So this entire sophisticated piece of machinery failed because of a simple O-ring. Okay, so there is a theory of development, which is in economics. If you go on to study, it was proposed by Nobel Prize winner Michael Kremer, which is called the O-ring theory of development, which argues that complementarities help the economy grow. And therefore, if you neglect something, if it goes to 0, everything fails. Just like if you give 5 shovels and have 1 person to work, it's useless. Okay, or if you have 10 right pairs and 3 left pairs, well, you actually effectively only have 3 pairs of shoes. So from complementarities, I'm going to move on to something else. So this is a Space Shuttle Challenger. Well, I should have shown you this video. I forgot. Okay. So the global south and the global north. So let's roughly divide the countries. I mean, for those of you who have not heard these terms, sort of the developed world is called the global north and the developing world is called the global south. Now, the global north has done their fair share of pollution to get ahead in the game. And now they would like the global south not to do that. So for example, they would like countries like India and China not to pollute. Okay. But this is a serious problem because countries that are now going through their development phase think that preventing pollution is an expensive strategy. Therefore, they are not going to do it unless somebody compensates them for it. So the idea is everybody would like less pollution in the world, They would like to pollute themselves and they would not like the others to pollute. Okay? Which unfortunately means, since everybody reasons exactly like that, there is no way to get rid of pollution. Okay? Here's another example. Colorism is a serious problem in Asia, Africa, and also in large parts of South America. And that's why we have these creams like Glow and Lovely, which is Fair and Lovely reinventing itself. So what's going on here? Or just imagine the entire beauty industry. What have they said? They basically argued that, look, if you use our product, then you get ahead in life in mate selection or in getting a job or looking smart, looking beautiful, whatever. Okay. So you should use it. Now, imagine how you reason in this situation. Say, well, if nobody else is using it, I should definitely use it because then I'll be ahead of everybody. If everybody else is using it, then I don't have a choice. I have to use it because I want to compete with them. So unfortunately, we are all locked into this idea that we need to use these products. And this is one of the most famous games in economics called the prisoner's dilemma. Okay? So the two prisoners would ideally not like to confess, but each of them realizes that if I confess, I get to go free because I will become state witness. And then they think, well, if the other guy is going to confess, I should confess, otherwise I'm going to prison. If the other guy is not confessing, I should confess because then I get to go free by becoming the witness for the government. Okay? So this is why cooperation is hard to achieve. Let's talk about another story some of you might have heard of. Now that you understand prisoner's dilemma, let's see if you can predict the outcome in this story, right? So Akbar decides that he wants to take bath in a tub of milk. So he tells his 50 ministers, tomorrow morning, each of you is going to come with a bucket of milk and pour it into my bathtub so I can take bath in a tub of milk. So every minister says, I'm just going to take water because the other guys are going to bring milk. That way I don't have to worry. What is the outcome? Everyone reasons like that. Next morning, Akbar wakes up, he goes to take his bath, and he finds that the room is full of water. The bathtub is full of water. So then he says, tomorrow, if there is no milk in that tub, if it is not full of milk, I'm going to punish you all, 25 gold coins. What do you think will happen? That's not a serious enough punishment. If he says, I will kill all of you, or I will behead all of you, then maybe it'll work. Otherwise, these people will still think, well, now there is a threat of punishment, and all the others will now follow through. So I still don't have to do it. Okay? This is what makes cooperation very difficult. This is why it is very difficult to address climate change. It is very difficult to address World Trade Organization type problems. It is very difficult to organize peace treaties because individual self-interest always drives us to do something that's in our favor, not necessarily in favor of society.
सर्द तेरा चकराए या दिल डूबा जाए आजा प्यारे पास हमारे काहे घबराए
All right, I'm done.
I think that was a great finish, I must say. You kept the audience hooked throughout the presentation. Thank you very much, sir, for starting this session on a very, very good note. Thank you very much, sir. With that being said, we'll move on to our next speaker. Before that, audience, if you have any questions, you can be put it up on your chat box. Towards the end, once all the speakers are done, we'll be posing these questions to our panelists and they'll be answering all your questions. So that's with respect to that. We'll move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker for today's session is Miss Yuvika Singhal. She's an economist with over 12 years of experience in Indian economic research with specialization in empirical work in macroeconomy and public policy. Prior to joining Quant Eco Research, she worked with Yes Bank for nearly a decade and ICICI Bank in close association with the treasury teams catering to clients across multinationals, large domestic corporates, government bodies, and ministries. At Quant Eco Research, Yuvika regularly presents to clients on the India economic and financial market outlook and comments on economic developments in the media. She has a significant expertise as a modeler and readily extends her core competency in macroeconomics to interdisciplinary work such as credit risk management and forecasting, among others. She holds a UG and PG degree in economics from Sri Ram College of Commerce and Delhi School of Economics, respectively. She represented India at the 2013 Economics International Visitors Leadership Program IVLP in the US. She'll be discussing the topic on what do economists do in research firms. So, welcome, ma'am. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Eva. It's an honor, a pleasure to be here. Just allow me a couple of seconds to share my screen, to put up the presentation. Just a short presentation, couple of slides. But it largely will give you an overview of what economists do in a research firm. So you've all heard Dr. Sarangian has laid the foundation of economics and some concepts within economics which are of interest: prisoner's dilemma, cooperation, and how do they work in real life, or whether they do not work in real life. So we heard a little bit of that, but let's take it a step forward to understand how, as an analyst or an economist, do we apply some of these concepts or something that we have learned in theory, in macroeconomics, and how do we have a application of those in the real world? So the topic for me is, what do economists do in a research firm? And if I was to answer this in one sentence, I would say that we connect the dots. That's largely because when we look at economy and economic data, there's plethora of data that is released on a day-to-day basis. And as an economist or a researcher, my biggest task at hand is to connect the dots and help clients, people that I talk to, investors, understand and develop a big picture as to what exactly is happening in the Indian economy. So it's connecting the dots, which is very, very important for a profile like mine. So let's get into a little bit of granularity. And when I say that, there's a lot of data that comes out on a day-to-day basis, if you pick up any business newspaper, you will see a barrage of data that was released overnight or in the previous 48 hours. You will see data such as IIP, CPI, GDP, core data, and there is volatility in this data because it's high frequency, it's monthly data. There could be seasonality that is getting witnessed in some of them. We know that sectors in the economy, especially sectors like agri, undergo seasonality. We know that industry as a sector could see a spike in, say, months of December, largely because in the month of December, we typically see exports shoot up. It's holiday season, Christmas season in a lot of Western countries, and we do see higher deliveries of exports in December. In similar logic, we also see sometimes spike in business output in the month of March, that being the fiscal year end for most of the firms. So how do we incorporate this data which is coming, which is hitting us literally on a high frequency basis? Some of this data could be at high frequency monthly, some of it could be quarterly. How do we put together a picture that is coming out of the data that is not just differentiated in its frequency, but also in terms of its values? So CPI could be, in one month, it could be 5%. In another month, it could shoot up to 6.5%. We've seen that kind of volatility. So for me, the biggest contribution to what I do in my work is to help clients understand what is the big picture that is emerging. So we try to detrend what we are looking at on a month-on-month basis. We try to understand seasonality and forecast what we are likely to see in the months to come. And when I say forecast, I'm not a forecaster. When I'm talking about forecasting, I will say that I can forecast accurately well for 1 year or 2 years in advance. We have to understand that as economists, we are constrained by the data that we have. We are also constrained by volatility in the economy. So the models that might have worked in the past, especially post-pandemic, might not hold true. So the ability for us to forecast with accuracy has also reduced. So my forecast timeline would probably be anywhere between 3 months to 12 months at best. I'm not going to forecast for my clients 2 years, 3 years hence, because I myself do not know how the world economy, how the Indian economy is going to shape up in a longer term. one important part of my job profile is to de-jargonize whatever I say. And, economists usually love to put in a lot of jargons, a lot of terms. And well, people might listen to an economist and, their jaws might drop and say, oh, wow, that sounded really nice. But if you ask them, did you understand a large part of it? A lot of people would probably say, no, we don't understand a lot of terms that you drop at a very high frequency. So essentially, when we reach out to clients or people in the market who might or might not have an economics background, a business person might have a very strong understanding of business, but might not have an equally strong understanding of economics. So an important part of my role is to whatever we say, it has to be in a simplified manner so that even if a report is picked up by a layman on the street, if in that case, at least 50 to 60% of what we are trying to say should be easily understood by the reader. That's something that we want to do when we are writing our reports. Then the research that we do is quite quick in its nature. So in comparison to research in academia, which could be over a longer period of time, months or years also for that matter, we do not have the luxury of time when we work in market research, because market is dynamic. There is flow of information, and not just on daily basis, but probably on an hourly basis. So every research that we have to do, every output that we have to do has to be very timely. It could be as short as turning out a report in a matter of a few hours or a few days. Nothing that we do would have a shelf life of maybe a couple of quarters or months, because the markets are dynamic, data is dynamic, and we would have to go back to the drawing board to see whether what we said maybe as early as the beginning of the year still holds true or not. So things move for us very quickly. Having said so, while our research could be quick, it's nevertheless quite rigorous. So most of the research that we do is backed up by data and analytics. And we typically, when we put out our research views, they are sieved in data. So we would look at how historical trends are, how historically certain indicators have behaved in a particular situation. And we would try to basis historical evidence, try to build a forecast or build a scenario that this is what seems plausible. But when we put out our views, we also try to balance them with upside and downside risks. We live in a world economy which is grappling with a lot of uncertainties. And in such a scenario, when there's high level of volatility, it's always best that we put out a view, but at the same time, provide some kind of a buffer to our view, a range forecast probably, or some kind of risks that if this was to move in a different way than what we have envisaged as a baseline assumption, things could look somewhat different. And that's where we come in when we put in our views. We also do scenario building, and we build in a lot of data, which is seeped in historical analysis. So this is largely what we do on a day in, day out basis. So like I said, it's largely looking at data, taking inferences from data as to where the economy is headed. But in terms of a role and a skill set, I think there are a couple of things which are very important for a market economist to have. The ability to read, ability to assimilate, look at data, write, and do all those things on a repeated basis. So when I say read, I typically read a lot. It could be from newspapers to journals to blogs. It's important to be able to assimilate a lot of information that you are reading. So just reading blindly wouldn't help, but to be able to bring out trends, connect the dots, like I said. If you are looking at GDP, then you should also be able to see where IIP within GDP kind of performed, what were the lead indicators that we were looking at within consumption within GDP. So you have to connect different indicators to build a big picture. Then we also look at a lot of data. We work extensively with data for the Indian economy, largely put out by the government. Data forms almost 40 to 50% of the work profile that I do. So it's not just research, but research which is sieved heavily into data. So like I said, I would devote nearly half of my time looking at data. So if economics interests you, and on top of that, if you enjoy looking at numbers, when you look at numbers, you see the numbers telling you a story, you look at numbers and you say, okay, I see what is happening here. I can plot a chart and I can, do some stylized analysis. Then I think I would say that you have the basic skill set to pursue economics, after your undergrads or post-graduation. And I think the other two skill sets which are important are to write. to basically what you are thinking, what you are analyzing, to be able to put that on paper. And increasingly, I feel that in the younger lot, in the times of Twitters and Instagram, when we have become extremely short on characters, it's very hard to tell younger lot to be able to write even a few pages, less a few paragraphs, or a longer journal or whatever. So I think it's very important as students to write. You could start as simple as writing a paragraph of something that you've researched. It could be a blog. It could be just random writing. And I would always urge that once you've written something, go back to it. Don't read it there and then maybe the next day, or in the next 48 hours. Let it be. Come back to it after a week and read it again. And I'm sure you'll have a different or a better perspective of what you've written yourself. So to be able to write is a very important aspect of my role, and also to be able to communicate what I'm thinking. So if I'm superlative in my analysis, but if I can't get the point across to my client or to an investor, it's almost a failed practice that I'm pursuing. So all these skill sets are very, very important: to read, to look at data, to connect the dots, write and communicate. Though I will say that to be able to write and to be able to communicate well, that comes with experience. It can be a skill that can be acquired, but your love for the subject, your love to read more and more economics, and to be able to look at data for a somewhat longer period of time is something that you should have in you to be able to pursue a data-driven analytical economics work for the rest of your life. And I think the most important part is, while I say that I repeat these things, in my job, but it's not without. It's not with monotony. That's largely because every day is a new day for me as a market economist. There's new data that has come out. There's something that a central banker has spoken. There's something that a central bank has acted upon. There's a war somewhere that is happening. There's some geopolitical uncertainty, some news flow that has come in. So we wake up every day with a fresh flow of information that we have to read, assimilate, analyze, and produce research on. So it's extremely dynamic. So while I might be doing the same things over and over again, but there is an element of dynamism in it, which keeps me going as a market analyst. And to end with what keeps me going, so obviously it's the passion for the subject. So you need to have that passion for reading economic subjects related to economics, anything that has implications for economics. Love for data, extremely important. Also, I think what has become important in this time and age is to acquire new skills. And that is where big data and new data tools are becoming increasingly important. And that's, I think, where we kind of step in as an independent economics consultancy, Quantico Research. We are one of the kind in India. Most of the economists that you'll see in India are typically associated with a financial organization. It could be a bank, it could be an NBFC, it could be a credit rating agency. There are very few independent organized voices in the sector. And that's where we thought that there was a gap, that people wanted to understand more economics, but they did not know how to reach out to an economist outside a big firm. And that's where we step in and essentially give intelligent economic inputs to our clients and investors. And we do not rely just on traditional techniques, but we also incorporate new age data and also new techniques of dealing with that data. And I think that is where we brought in some disruption to our industry as well, that people knew of these economists who worked with big firms, but there was no independent voice that was calling a spade a spade. And that's where we kind of filled in. I think from a personal perspective, as an economist, you'll be able to build a brand name for yourself, a repute for yourself, if you have views which have meaning, and you can put across those views in a meaningful way to a larger audience. And I think two things that work for me and could work for others as well is that my job has no targets. So the only thing I have to do is love the subject, write out reports, make them sound very intelligent, have some takeaways from those, but I have no targets, monetary or any other targets to be achieved. So if targets are something that you run away from and you love economics, definitely working as an economist is something that you should try to do. And we end up earning decent money in the profile. So it's not as if we are, long gone are the days when we would imagine an economist wearing a jhola and, walking down the street, and no longer. So we make decent money in being in business. And that's how we kind of transcended also from, being a salaried economist to being entrepreneurial economists now. So that's essentially what my job profile does to me. So I think the big crux is that as an economist, what works for me is staying hungry and staying foolish, staying hungry for knowledge always, and staying foolish to admit that I don't know everything. I'm learning every day that I'm on my job. So that's what I essentially do, and that's what my job profile largely brings on the table. We can take questions and answers later, but I'll stop here as of now. Hiba, over to you.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sure your presentation has definitely inspired so many of them to get into the field. So thank you very much for sharing your insights and thoughts on this lovely presentation. And I must say, let's move on to our third and final speaker, who will be Dr. Jairaj Rajaya. So Dr. R. Jairaj is a professor and HOD of economics at VIT University, Chennai, India. His research interest lies in the area of international business, trade, energy, climate studies, sustainability, macro finance, and econometrics. He has more than 15 years of experience in teaching and industry. He's completed his doctoral research with a specialization of international trade and macro finance in the University of Madras. He has published a number of articles in various journals of national and international repute. He served as a resource person and expert at various industries and academic platforms in the area of international economics, international business management, and econometric modeling. His topic will be why should you study economics? So, welcome, sir. The floor is all yours. Before I hand the floor over to you, audience, you can put in your questions in the question answer box. Our panelists will be very happy to assist you with all your questions once the session is done. Welcome, sir. You can now proceed with your session.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'll start with why should you study economics? So I'm not giving any introduction to this topic since you have already heard more of economics from the two experts prior to my presentation. So why should you study economics? And there are some questions in general. First one is, you can see, why should nations have so much of wealth? Why some of the nations are having little? And what causes men to earn more than women? And that's the recent trend nowadays. And why data is more important and making sense of the world? And what do recessions come from? Where do recessions come from? What we are supposed to do? And these are some of the questions that arise when we understand why should we learn economics. So we can get all these answers from the problems that we can see in day-to-day lives. So basically we should learn how the basic economic concepts that are affecting in our day-to-day life by reading these brief basic articles that you can read in newspapers and watch news channels, etc. The wide field of economics that allows us to make sense of the life, and it allows us to see the past, make sense of the news of the present, and to tell future and what kind of decisions has to be taken. So from smallest to largest, economics covers everything. And it also provides a rigorous and comprehensive understanding of economic concepts, models, methods that can be applied to various real-world problems and issues. Economics develops the analytical, logical, critical thinking skills that is very essential for solving complex problems of the world that is facing currently. It exposes students to various branches and subfields of economics, such as microeconomics, macroeconomics, game theory, econometrics, developmental economics, industrial economics, international economics. There are so much of fields that are available, you can see. And economics prepares the students for a wide range of career opportunities that we will discuss later in public and private sectors, such as academia, research, consultancy companies, banking sector, policy area, and more and more. Economics opens up the possibility for pursuing higher studies in research in economics, such as masters, you can go for it, or you can go for PhDs and others in other specialized courses as well. And how economics help the firms, governments, and people. So businesses, governments, and individuals all benefit greatly from economics. So for instance, market environment can be studied, customers' behavior, production cost, ideal pricing strategies can be better understood with the help of economic concepts and models. Businesses can boost their productivity, earnings, capacity to compete using their resources that can be done with the help of economic models and theories. Government expenditure, taxation, regulation, trade, monetary policy, fiscal policy, and they are all examples of social welfare policies that economics helps the shape and assess all this. Economic growth, stability, equity, sustainability, and etc. can also be easily attained by the governments when this is done by the government. People can also benefit from the economics since it guides them in making wiser choices with the limited resources like time, money, abilities. Potentially, this can aid individuals in making most of their resources, especially money and choices. You can understand how economics works and how it influences the world around you through economics. BSc Economics, which is at VIT, which also offered if you are curious to learn economics as a degree. And there are a lot of branches of economics, and this is for the people who have not understood, who have not studied economics, especially the various branches that are there in the economics. You can just simply see microeconomics, macroeconomics. This is what we have heard. More than that, we have mathematical economics, international economics, public economics, developmental economics, environmental economics, game theory, labor economics, financial economics, actuarial science, econometrics, health economics. There are a lot and many more branches are there. And why should why should you have an economics degree? So this is as per the recent uh, research that is going on. Approximately 1 crore of graduates pass out in India. This is the data that we have taken in 2021. It would be more right now. And youth population aged between 15 to 29 years. Among all the disciplines at undergraduate level, the admission is highest in arts, 33.5%, and followed by science, and science is around 15%, and engineering and technology around 12%. So there is a need for career diversification depending on the available opportunities in the job market as well. Rather than targeting the traditional job profiles, the candidates have started focusing on the new profiles or new opportunities that are created in the world in the field of traditional programs like economics, finance, research, policy, etc. Job market favors programs of economics, psychology, commerce, etc. The focus on offering traditional programs with interdisciplinary approach has increased in economics, for example, economics with finance, economics with data science, economics in business, policy, research, and these are the new areas that are being developed in the fields of economics. And what are the job opportunities for the economics graduates? So you can become an economist, you can become an economic advisor to a company. And investment banks, they look for vice president, analyst, etc. And consultancy and research firms, they look for business consultant, business analyst, international business associate, financial advisor, forex dealer, and even in journal and media sector as well, you can become content writer. Even in advertising sector also, people of economics are required. economic journalist, research analyst, policy analyst, investment analyst. And apart from that, bank and some areas, banking and finance, government sector, public sector is also looking for more of economics. And I mean, economics graduates can get the opportunities in RBA, NITI Aayog. And apart from Indian government or public organizations, the candidates can also look for opportunities in international organizations like IMF, World Bank, uh, World Trade Organization, Asian Bank, and there are a lot of opportunities are there. And the research firms, and especially recently, the think tanks are also emerging, and the students of economics are required for this kind of positions. And this is one of the questions that arise naturally. And so once, when you say that you are an economist, and this is the basic question that may come to your mind, whether you become an academic economist or policy analyst or policy economist. And to understand much better, you can have these areas of discussions like solving problems and finding problems. Most of radical and noticeable difference between a policy and academic economist is that the former work with the problem that are given, whereas the later one, the complete tent, what the problems worth greater attention. And the second one is the theoretical mechanism and practical implementation. So when the problem is given to the policy economist, their task is to find viable solution, often within the given budget constraint, so as to answer how the question. When the academic researcher faces same issues, and their task is to evaluate that works in principle so as to answer the what question is. And then next one is persuasion skills and methodological precision. And the policy world is a solution oriented on so mobilizing as many people as possible around the policy is a success factor. Meanwhile, academia is expected to generate new scientific evidences so focus is on the way the problem is approached. The next one is making changes and furthering the knowledge. Policy economists are hired to find out the feasible solution to a time-specific economic problem. So outcome of their work is well-designed policy that brings expected results. In academia, in contrast, it produces new knowledge. So the outcome is measured in terms of contribution that are done which is a scholarly work or scholarly concept or model that are created by the economists. So trying out both the worlds can help the economists know which they prefer, gain and appreciation for both. So what eventually matter is that one genuinely enjoys what they are doing. So whether they become policy economists or academic economists. And this is the question that may come because why I have put this, it's not just to learn whether economics is a science or not. And apart from that, whether to study BA economics or BSc economics, whether to study MA economics or MSc economics, this kind of questions may come to the mind of candidates. So the former one, economics, is becoming a science. It started with an art. A lot of decisions are made in the ancient days, and later, and by introducing new principles, concepts, models, prediction, and all this have made economics as a science. So many of the institutions have started offering science programs from their institutions. So these are the academic focuses that many of the institutions are having: economics with quantitative analytical approach, economic research, forecasting, and modeling. And game theory is very important. And many of the even other programs like business programs are offered with game theory and strategic decisions. And policy analytics, research, on various sectors of the economy, which are focused by many institutions. Entrepreneurship, development, and venture capital, like Mr. Yubika Singhal has also mentioned about entrepreneurial economics, which is a new area that has been developing in the world. And then you have financial analytics. And apart from all this, you have data science, and data science is becoming popular, and which are used in economics by using a lot of software like Python, R, Reviews, Excel, and so many other new programming softwares which are coming up. So this is how the academic focus is going on across the world. And if you demand for a program that makes sense in real life, and of course, economics is the ideal subject. So with this, I wind up. Thank you so much. If we have any questions, we can discuss them.
Thank you very much, sir. The last slide summed up the whole thing, and I'm sure everybody has some great takeaways that they had in presentation. Thank you very much to all three panelists. So, with that being said, we will now open the floor for questions and any comments if the audience has. We have around 30 questions that are up in the question answer box. In case a question is gone to any particular person, you can unmute and answer. In case it's an open question, any of you can unmute and just choose to answer. So, our first question goes: how does the job market for economics look like in 2024? Is study abroad for economics a right choice? Whoever wishes to answer the question can unmute and go ahead.
So let me take that question, Eva. So I think the job market is pretty bright. There are ample opportunities that Dr. Jayaraj also spoke about. There are a lot of fields who want to hire economists in India. And I think what is an interesting trend that has happened over the last probably a few decades is that that no longer when people want to hire an economist, they are asking for a PhD degree. Most of the economists now that are getting hired, whether it's in the banking sector or in the market research, most of us are masters in economics. So that works well. If somebody, yes, wants to pursue a PhD, you're more than welcome. But the long number of years that one was earlier, expected to spend and then graduate to a job market is no longer being seen. So that's a shift in a trend that we've seen. And I think what is interestingly going to happen eventually in India as well is a trend that we've seen that globally, while, the traditional hirers of economists are continuing to do so, but there is a catch-up of trend within the corporates as well. If you look at US and other economies more developed vis-a-vis India, there are a lot of interests from corporates to hire economists to help them give intelligent business economic inputs. So if you look at the likes of Netflix, Amazon, Ubers, you name the firm and they would probably have a big economist team within them to give them certain inputs or bring a different perspective on the table when they are discussing business strategy. So I think, in my opinion, that is a trend that is also likely to get galvanized in India. We do have some corporates that have an in-house economist teams, but not all. But we would see this not just demand, but also supply of economists kind of grow in India. And I think that's the trend that we are looking at. And as far as studying in India or overseas is concerned, I think it's a very personal choice. Obviously, one should understand that there is a monetary difference. When you remain in your country, you are expected to spend a certain amount of money. But when you travel overseas, the education costs could be very different. There could be a living expense, there could be an accommodation costs, etc. Travel expenses that also need to be borne by the student. So it's a very personal choice. I think, though, I would say that Indian institutes and the education that they offer in some of the master's programs are almost at par with some of the global universities. So I would say it's ultimately a choice of the students and where they want to put their choice or preference. So it's not, there's nothing that I wouldn't say one is better than the other. So there are ample good opportunities in the Indian education system as well. There are a lot of good institutes that one could look at.
Yes, thank you very
Can
much,
I
ma'am.
chime in
Yes,
on
sir,
the
you want to
last point? Yeah,
so
I'm
you
just
can
going
add
to
on.
chime in on the last point. So actually, I completely agree with Yuvika that it's not just about money, but I would also ask people to think about, well, you're going to incur expenses. What about the visa issues? What's the likelihood of being able to find a job that will give you the relevant visa to stay? And if you just want to go get a degree, come back, then obviously this is not a pertinent question. But, as the global economy is evolving, there seem to be growing labor market restrictions in many of the developed countries, which makes it very difficult. It's very difficult to go get your degree and then find a job. So if that's your way of thinking, that you're going to go there to get a job there, then you really should look into your decision very carefully.
Yes. We hope that answers the question. Whoever put the question forward, we move on to our next question. So I think this is an open question. It says, can someone explain the complementarities concept? So if anyone wishes to take the question, you can unmute and go ahead.
Both the doctors are equipped to do it more than myself. So
I'll
Yes,
just answer it. So there are two ways of thinking about goods. They are complements or substitutes. Okay, so you can think about brown sugar and white sugar as being substitutes for sugar. Brown eggs, white eggs are substitutes. Okay, so you have one versus the other is pretty much the same thing. Now, those ideally are not substitutes. Okay, but neither are they complements. Right. So vast majority of goods are neither complements nor substitutes. I gave you some examples of what is a substitute. Now let's talk about what is a complement. Complement, the idea is very simple. These are things that go together, right? So as I said earlier, you might want to think about bread and butter. Okay, so the butter goes well with the bread. You can't just eat butter. Maybe some people like to eat ghee just by itself, but in general, people are not just eating spoons of butter or ghee, right? Or similarly, as I said, you can't have a lot of right shoes and no left shoes. Right shoes complement left shoes. Okay, so this is not the word compliment as in giving somebody a compliment saying, you look smart today or whatever, right? So this is complement with an E, which means things that go together, right? So it's the opposite of substitutes, where one can be used to replace the other. This is the idea. The complementarity is an idea that things go together. Okay, lock and key. Okay, if you just have 5 keys and no locks, it's useless. And similarly, if you have a bunch of locks but no keys, they're also useless. So for the purposes of productivity in economics, we do need to be aware of situations where there is complementarity. I hope that kind of explains the idea.
Yes, I'm sure that did answer the question, sir. Thank you very much. Our next question is for Miss Yuvika. So the question goes, which method gives the correct picture with regard to GDP, whether it is production basis or value basis, and which one and why? So you can go ahead and ask.
I think most of the economies go for a value add largely because it takes on board prices. When you look at just production, it's only output. You're not really looking at how input costs moved. But when you look at value add, that's a more comprehensive measure of not just output, but also it keeps in mind where how the input prices move. So most of the economies, if you'll see globally, have over the years moved from an output to a value add, and that's what India also does. And I think it's a very standardized, accepted way of calculating GDP now.
Yes, we hope that it answered the question. Thank you very much, ma'am. We will move on to our next question. So the question goes, how will studying economics help in civil services during preparation as well as after becoming a civil services officer? Dr. Jairaj, do you want to take the question?
Yeah. Take this question. Economics is very closely connected with UPSC exams in India especially, because the success rate of graduates, if you see that the economics graduates have mostly cleared the UPSC exams. That is one thing. And apart from that, you have an option to become Indian Economic Service Officer as well. So if you are able to, if you complete masters in economics, and you will be eligible to write Indian Economic Service. So that option is always open. And for normal UPSC, graduation is eligible, and economics is very supportive. There are some courses like economics, political science, and these are the subjects which are very easy to crack. And I'm saying that success rate is high.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Jairaj, for answering that question. I'm sure it did help the person who asked the question. We'll move on to our next question. So it goes, I would like to learn consumer behavior. So where do I start and where do I look at? Whoever wishes to answer can take the question. Yes, Dr. Sudipta, do you want to take it?
Consumer behavior is, it's a huge field. So there is marketing, there's psychology, there is economics, there's behavioral economics, right? So it really boils down to what or which aspect of consumer behavior you want to understand. And then there is various levels of difficulty. So I would say that first thing you have to decide whether you are looking at it from a marketing point of view or from an economist point of view, right? Because the answers are going to be very different. So you can for now at least you can forget about psychology. The answers are going to be very different if you're looking at what marketing people are going to tell you and what economists are going to tell you. The basic idea would be to start with a principles of microeconomics book to get an idea, and similarly to start with the principles of marketing book to read the introductory chapters on consumer behavior. And then there are subsequent follow-up books. Once you read this, you can easily figure out what follow-up books are. I'm sure Dr. Jairaj, if you reach out to him later, he would tell you. But I mean, either way, I would say you start with the introductory chapters on consumer behavior from these two fields.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir, for answering that question. We will move on to our next question, which goes, how can one develop interest in data and economic analysis? What is the first practical step towards it?
Okay.
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Okay. So this is one area, economics with data science, which is big on recent days. And what has to be done is, economics and data science both are very much connected together. And if you see the software, if you see the data analysis and etc., they are very much connected, because when the data scientists use the data, especially when they go for forecasting or when they go for market adaptability, and data science is playing major role. Data science related software. Nowadays you have Python, you have SQL kind of programs. They are very much connected with the economics. So economics and data science, that the combination is going to be most successful programs in coming days. That's what I feel. So I hope I have answered.
Thank you very much, sir, for answering that question. We'll move on to our next question, which goes, I'm interested to study economics. I am 29 years old and a working professional. Is there any way I can pursue economics? Whoever would like to answer can unmute their mics and go ahead.
Okay, economics is, open to everyone. Anybody can learn economics. It's not necessary that previously you should have studied economics. Nowadays, you start with, in the first year when you do graduation, you start with microeconomics, macroeconomics, statistics, mathematics, etc. So I don't think it will be a difficult part for the candidates when they pursue with economics. I don't think, that there is no prerequisite to study economics program. You can simply start your career with economics.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. And that's also leads us to our next question, which I think 5 or 6 of them have posed the same question, which goes, what are some of the job opportunities we will get by studying economics? So anyone would like to answer that question? It will definitely help the 5 or 6 of them who had raised the same question.
I think Jairaj had the answer to this question on his slides.
I have already discussed that in my presentation. Anyways, I'll just share that as well. You can become, just a minute, I must.
I thought of actually skipping that question, but then it kept repeating a lot of times in the chat box. So I thought they would want to hear it. So I just posted.
Okay.
Yes, so you can go ahead and share your slide and answer the question.
Okay.
I mean, so while he's sharing the slides, I can just talk a little bit. So I think, one of the things that people say about economists is if you put 12 economists in a room, there'll be 13 opinions, because Keynes will have 2 opinions. Okay. What economics really teaches you is critical thinking, how to analyze the problem. Policymakers then decide which solution they want to implement. So, in a sense, it opens up a vast range of careers for you. Okay. Now, Dr. Jairaj will tell you a listing of that vast range of careers.
Yes,
Okay.
Dr. Jairaj.
You can become a business consultant, business analyst in many of the corporate companies, and you have a lot of research firms in especially in North, in Delhi, Noida area. You can find plenty of consultancies and research firms, and also you can find economics think tanks. All these think tanks, they analyze the policy, they analyze the economic concepts and see how it reflects on the society, how it reflects on the corporate companies. Each company, if you take automobile company, BMW, any company you take, there will be an economist. Without economists, they don't take any decisions because they have started giving more importance to the economist. So that's why there is a more hiring for economics graduates, economics researchers. That's how it has been going on. And apart from that, I have already told that in the public sector also, you have plenty of demand for economics, both state and central governments. You can go to RBI officer, you can go to planning commission, Niti Aayog, etc. Even banks are looking for economists. Investment banks, the investment banks which are offering highest packages than any other, position. Economists are getting highest package in investment banks. Even for internship, they pay so much. So the people with knowledge of econometrics software, volatility analysis, yield curve, and they are all getting highly paid. That's how the trend is going on. And apart from that, even IT companies, capital market, you have stock market, you have insurance companies. They all look for economics. So economics has, it's a kind of broad area where students get opportunities there.
Yes, and the opportunities are never ending. So I hope that did answer the question of all of them who raised this question.
I mean,
So, Dr. Sutta, you were adding something,
I
right?
just wanted to
Please go
add, so, economics is not like accounting, okay? It's a specific skill, right? Economics is actually thinking about problems, and in a way, it stays with you forever. So when you go home from office, you can still apply the principles and reasoning that you've studied to look at things you're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you are a chartered accountant, you go home, you're not applying your accounting principles to things at home. Okay. So, for example,
Yes.
I mean, one of the topics I talk about in my book is, you go to an office party with acquaintances, and nobody's taking the last piece of cake or the last slice of pizza. Why? Okay. So things like, I mean, this applies everywhere. So it's a way of thinking. You have to have a passion for it. And in the modern economy, you have to build up your data skills. Okay. So you should be ready to work with data and get your hands dirty with data.
Yes, thank you very much, Doctor, for adding in some more points. We hope that it answered the question. We'll move on to our next question. It's quite lengthy, but I think it's very, very important for me to address this question. So the question goes, there are a lot of benefits in studying economics, as the presenters of today gave an excellent presentation to understand the same. But in countries like India, all mathematically skilled students do not prefer to study economics, and most of these students would want to go to science streams. How can we transform their mind setting from science to economics? Whoever wishes to take the question is free to unmute and give us theirs.
Yeah,
Yes, Dr. Jairaj.
economics itself is a science. That's what I have already discussed in my presentation. Economics itself is a science. If you have science mentality, if you are able to understand the science subjects, then obviously economics will be so easy for them to learn economics. It's nothing difficult to transform from one area to another area. In fact, I teach the students of engineering, I teach the students of science, graduate students, etc. And they learn faster than the typical economics candidates. This is what I have understood, because they have that kind of quick understanding skills. Learning capacity is too high from them. It will be easier for them to come to this field.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr.
Let me add in
Yes,
my
ma'am,
two
please.
cents here. So when I was in school, I was a science student and I had science with economics. And through the 2 years of doing the science program, though I was fairly decent at it, I knew that I didn't want to pursue science. And while it was a rude shock for my parents who thought I would sit for an engineering exam or some kind of a architecture kind of an examination, I did sit for any of those because I was very clear that I did not want to pursue science. So I think it's the mentality of the student. If you like economics, have the courage to say that I like the subject and I want to pursue it. Don't follow the bandwagon. If everybody's doing science around you, that doesn't mean that you have to do science if your heart is not there. Also, I would never push a person to say that don't do science and do economics, or don't do economics or do science, or whatever. Do what your heart says. And that's how you will be able to do that subject for a long period of time without regretting the choice that you've made. And it's okay even if you regret the choice, but at least you made the choice and you decided what subject you wanted to pursue. So just go with what your mind and heart tells you to do.
Yes.
I will kind of
Dr.
agree. So
Sudipta,
my
yes.
story is very similar to you, Yovika. I also, but even from an earlier time frame where basically I fought with my parents. My father was an engineering professor to do economics. So I also had science and I wanted to do economics. Most of my research is kind of applied math. Okay, so it's not like you don't need science. You need that strong math background. But I think the last point that Yuvika made is the serious issue. I don't think we want to persuade people to do one thing or the other. Okay, I think people have to, especially since I did what I wanted, and I think Yuvika is basically saying the same. She did what she wanted. That's, finding your calling is what will keep you happy in the long run. I do not think it's a good idea to persuade people to do one thing or the other. But I will just say this: if you want to do economics seriously, at least at the master's level, two things: you should not be afraid of dealing with data. You should not be afraid of dealing with math. So you will need those two skills. You don't have to be a mathematician, okay? But you should not be afraid of data. You should not be afraid of math. It's very, very basic stuff. But you should be willing, you should be open-minded and willing to do it. And I don't think we should try to persuade people to move in certain directions.
Yes, thank you very much to all the panelists for giving your insights on that questions. We will take two more questions, after which we will close the session. And those of you who haven't got your questions answered, your answers will come via an email, so you don't have to worry about that at all. So our second last question goes, what are some of the good universities for Masters of Economics in India? Who would like to take the question? Can go ahead.
Okay, I cannot say that because VIT itself has started offering economics program this year onwards. But still, there are so many institutions which are there in India. You can few of them are where Dr. Sudipta and Ms. Yubika have studied already. Lady Sriram College is very good one. Delhi School of Economics, Madras School of Economics, Gokhale is also popular. A lot of good institutions are there already, and which are, some of them are traditional and some of them are newly emerging programs. And my suggestion is go for these career opportunities, how they are supporting, and because that is also important nowadays. Which institute is offering the support, career placement supports, etc. And that is also one part that you can think of it. And apart from that, you can see the curriculum design, how they are giving, what kind of specialization that they are giving. Because many institutions, they have started giving new areas as an interdisciplinary program, like data science, forensics. You look for that. Depending on your interest, you can choose.
Anyone else would like to add on anything?
I mean, the only thing I will say is that, I think on top of this is, it really depends on what you want to do with the degree, right? Do you want to pursue a PhD or you don't want to pursue a PhD? If you are really serious about pursuing a PhD, maybe you should think about places like Delhi School of Economics, ISI Delhi, and so on. But if you are interested in a non-academic career, all of the things that Dr. Jairaj pointed out are very important. And I also think that location is important. Okay. So I wouldn't want to, if I'm interested in an academic job, in a corporate sector job, I don't think it would be a good idea to go and study economics in a little village or in a little Nalanda University. I actually think it's a very bad idea to set up university in a place like Nalanda today. It's not well connected at all. It'll be very difficult to have on-campus interviews. So if you are thinking of a corporate job, you want to be in a big city where a lot of employers will come for on-campus interviews.
Just let me add. So some of the institutes that we go and usually hire from, and we have a very active internship program. So Delhi School of Economics, Madras School of Economics, Gokhale Institute, IGIDR, ISI, both Calcutta and Delhi. Then we have also seen some newer age institutes like B.R. Ambedkar School of Economics is coming up very well. Ashoka University also has some great students who are now opting for private universities. So these are some of the names on top of my recall. I might have, slipped one or two here and there, but these would be the institutes that I would want to, or at least readily hire somebody from, because I would know that their academic base is fairly rigorous. They would have a certain skill set when they come on board with us. So that's from a jobs perspective, if I could add.
Thank you very much to all the panelists for sharing your insights on that. With that being said, we will now have our last question. I think it's a super interesting question, in my opinion. So, yeah, the question goes, with the rise of AI, what impact does it have on economy and employment? Whoever wishes to answer can unmute and let us know your suggestions.
So is this specific to economics?
No, it's an open question. I don't think it says what impact does it have on economy and employment. So.
Okay. So I always believe that, we've seen newer technologies come into shape time and again. And have we ceased to exist as a race, or have we ceased jobs go away completely? Absolutely not. So I think every technology leap that the human civilization takes, it does displace a few jobs, but it also creates a newer set of jobs. So I think it's a zero-sum game in some sense. So you need, what as students probably you need to do is you need to understand how an AI or some kind of a digital transformation in your sector, what kind of jobs is it likely to displace, and what you should be ready for. What is a job requirement for, or a job skill set requirement for 10 years hence? That is what you need to assess at this point in time to ensure that you have that requisite skill set when you enter the market, or you're ready to enter the job market. So that's what I think. But I think I'll leave the floor open to other panelists to add some more views, nuanced views to that.
Yes, we can add some more points. Who would like to go on first? Dr. Sudipta, do you want to start?
I think Yuvika said it correctly, right? New technology, I mean, since the first industrial revolution, we've been seeing new technologies come and go.
Yes.
So, and she also gave the most practical advice. You have to think how it's going to affect your own sectoral performance. It's easy to imagine that very simple jobs can be taken over by AI, but there is still a lot of jobs that AI is not going to be able to touch.
When tool was introduced, there was a big, and people were shouting at that, how, it will replace the jobs of the teachers, etc. And, Google is existing, teachers are also existing now. Then any technology, whenever it comes, it creates a noise, and after some time it fades away. So of course, we have to find the new opportunities out of which, as this is because told. So I think that's the perfect answer.
Let me add another point,
Yes.
that I think
Sure.
any technology or AI that aims to disrupt would only lead to higher efficiency. Let me give you an example of being an economist. So probably my boss, who's maybe 25 or 30 years older than me, when she started her career, she would literally have to note down every data point that was released by the government. So she would have a headline number, she would have a granular number, subgranular number, and she would do it manually, literally maybe on paper, and then put it on the computer. When we started our job, we still did a little bit of manual stuff. But in the last 10, 15 years, what we've seen there, these software companies who have come in, and at the click of the button, they refresh the entire data set. So while we were putting a lot of effort to get that data, that was not our job core competency. Our job core competency was to be able to analyze the data intelligently. So when we have that data at the click of a button, we can channelize all our energies to analyze the data and bring out intelligent assessment of what the data is telling us. We no longer need to do what we call the donkey's work to sit and type data into our Excel file. So that is the kind of efficiency that AI and technology will bring into the work that we do as economists.
Yes, there are advantages and disadvantages, and I liked how we end on the note that humans cannot be replaced by all these machines. I think that was a great way to end this entire webinar. So, with that being said, we've come to the end of today's wonderful webinar, and I must say it was great and filled with tons of knowledge. And I'm sure we all know a lot about economics now, even for me personally, because I didn't have much knowledge about it before this webinar. A big thanks to all the panelists for joining us today and sharing their wonderful insights. A big thanks to all the audience and all of those who asked questions and interacted. Thank you very much. And a big thanks to everyone involved who have tuned in on this Sunday evening to learn about why does economics matter. This is the webinar on Why Does Economics Matter, presented to you by VIT Chennai under the Hindu Education Plus Career Counseling Series. Thank you all and have a great, great day ahead. It was lovely hosting the three of you today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much and take care of yourselves. Have a great day.